Every single person on Earth is unique and extraordinary, but throughout history, a rare few have stood out so intensely, so undeniably, that the world couldn't look away. These weren't myths or fantasies pulled from ancient scrolls. They were real people, living, breathing individuals who shattered every idea of what a body could be, how a life could evolve, and what it meant to exist far beyond the bounds of normal. From real-life Wolfman to the transparent man, today we're going to look at the 15 most shocking circus freaks that ever existed. Number 15. Edmund Newell. Edmund Newell spent his life proving small didn't mean insignificant. He grew up in Chicago, where curiosity about his size followed him everywhere, long before he ever stood on a stage. When P.T. Barnum discovered him, Edmund turned what others whispered about into a career. Under the names General Grant Jr. and Major Edward Newell, he traveled with the Circus and met Minnie Warren, a performer like him. Their wedding in 1877 drew crowds, two people finding love in a world built to stare. A year later, Minnie died giving birth, leaving Edmund completely broken. He left America behind, moved to England, and tried to rebuild his life. There he remarried, had 2 children, and lived quietly, far from circus lights. He never escaped the image the world knew, but he learned to carry it differently. When he died in 1915, it wasn't the stage that defined him, it was how he kept living when the applause and the show stopped. Number 14. Chang U Ping. Chang's life was spent between wonder and discomfort. People stared not because he performed, but because of what they couldn't understand. He was born with a second face, partly formed on the side of his head, with a mouth and faint traces of eyes and scalp. It wasn't monstrous, just tragic and human. As he grew older, the second mouth moved when he spoke, and it made living in public nearly unbearable. For years, doctors studied him as a case, never as a man. In his 40s, he finally agreed to surgery. The procedure was long and dangerous, but it worked. When the bandages came off, he looked at his reflection and saw himself alone for the first time. He returned to his small village in China and lived out his life quietly. Chang wasn't searching for fame, just peace. And after decades of being looked at, he finally got to look back without fear. Number 13. Altoini. Altoini's height made him a spectacle, but his heart made him unforgettable. By 12, he was already taller than his father, and by adulthood, he towered at over 7 feet. Every inch came with pain. His bones ached, his joints swelled, but he carried himself with calm pride. The circus gave him purpose. On the road, he met Jeannie Smith, a performer who barely reached his knee, and together, they built something real. They weren't a gimmick, they were partners. After leaving the circuit, they settled in Gibsonton, Florida, a haven for retired performers. Al opened a small lodge, repaired televisions, and even became the town's fire chief. People came for the legend, but stayed for the kindness. He spent his life helping others instead of chasing fame. When he died in 1962, the town honored him not as a giant, but as a neighbor. He spent his years lifting people, literally and otherwise, and that's what lasted. Number 12. Jesus Chuy, Aceves. Jesus doesn't try to hide his face, he wears it with pride. He comes from a family in Laredo where hypertrichosis has appeared across generations. Thick hair grows across his face, giving him the appearance of a myth. But Jesus isn't a legend. He's a husband, a father, and a man who turned stares into stability. Alongside his daughters, both born with the same condition, he's traveled the world under banners like Ripley's, Circo Caballero, and Venice Beach Freak Show. Some nights he played the Wolfman. Others, he just performed. His sister, also affected, works as a police officer. They trace their family history back to Julia Pastrana, another famous performer marked by hair and exploitation. But Jesus did something rare. He reclaimed the role. He embraced his image, not as a gimmick, but as an identity. His story didn't start in a circus tent, and it won't end there. He lives in full view, not as a monster, as a man who never flinched. Number 11. Josephine Joseph. She stood on stage and made people question what they thought they knew about gender, identity, and balance. Half her body carried the shape of a man, the other unmistakably feminine. Audiences were stunned, confused, sometimes even angry, but they couldn't look away. She leaned into it, performing as the half-man, half-woman, not to shock, but to exist on her own terms. She appeared in sideshows across Europe and later in Todd Browning's Freaks, where her presence said more than any script ever could. The line between performance and survival blurred. Outside the ring, she lived privately, far from cameras and crowds, because the world wasn't built for someone who didn't fit either side. Nobody knows how her story ended, only that she left behind an image that never stopped echoing. Josephine's courage wasn't in what she looked like. It was in daring to stand there at all when most people wouldn't have. Number 10. Dey Andrews. Dey Andrews doesn't just perform, he pushes his body to its breaking point. Sword-swallowing, fire-eating, bed of blades, spear-bending, and straitjacket escapes. He's done it all, and not as a stunt, but as a life. Starting with a magic set at 5, Dey took his curiosity into street performances, then festivals, TV shows, circuses, and even medical studies. He once swallowed a curved 120-degree sword, setting a Guinness World Record. Another time, he bent steel rebar with his throat. Beyond sideshow stages, he studied kung fu in China, yoga in the Himalayas, and volunteered with kids in Cambodia. His act is built on control, every muscle, every breath, timed against danger. But he also taught doctors at Johns Hopkins how sword swallowing could help patients with throat trauma. In between shows, he teaches meditation and internal martial arts. Dey didn't just master pain, he turned it into communication between body, mind, and audience. Some gasp, some flinch, but everyone leaves totally changed. Number 9. Katya Schumann. Katya Schumann grew up surrounded by sawdust rings and saddled horses. She was raised in Copenhagen, part of a long line of equestrian performers who treated circus life not as a job, but as a tradition. She was performing by 10, mastering liberty routines, Roman riding, and high-level dressage. In the 1970s, she earned some of Europe's top circus awards. Then came the move to the US, where she joined the Big Apple Circus in the 1980s and made history as the first woman to perform the Courier of St. Petersburg. She toured across the country while raising 2 children with Big Apple founder Paul Binder. Her son Max was born in their RV the same night she performed. In retirement, she didn't slow down. She restored a crumbling farm in northern Denmark and turned it into a summer circus and sanctuary where animals and old performers could find peace. Katya never saw the circus as an escape. For her, it was always home. Number 8. Moira Orfei. Moira didn't blend in anywhere. With bright red lipstick, heavy eyeliner, and that towering turban, she was impossible to miss, and that's exactly how she wanted it. Her life started in the ring, raised inside Italy's Circus Orfei. But she wasn't handed fame. She earned it, riding, performing aerials, training doves, and handling crowds. In 1960, she launched her own circus and put her name on everything. Her posters were everywhere. Kids knew her face before they even saw the tent. She also acted in over 40 Italian films and became a household name far beyond circus grounds. Even as the crowds got smaller and the TV got louder, she stayed on the road. In 2006, she suffered a stroke during a performance, but kept going under care. She died in 2015 at 83, still unforgettable. Moira didn't just perform, she ran the whole show. And in Italy, nobody ever questioned who the real star was. Her name still means circus. That never changed. Number 7. Barbett. Before Barbett ever wore a costume, he'd already figured out how to defy expectations. As a child in Texas, he practiced tightrope routines on his mother's clothesline. By his teens, he had joined the circus circuit, performing aerial acts in full drag. Audiences believed they were watching a graceful woman, right up until the final moment, when Barbett pulled off the wig and struck a sharp, masculine pose. That moment of shock became the signature. By the 1920s, he was performing in Paris and attracting the attention of artists like Jean Cocteau, who admired the fluidity, the elegance, and the refusal to be boxed in. Barbett's act wasn't a gimmick, it was commentary. After his illness ended his time in the air, he continued behind the scenes, working as a choreographer and even coaching Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon in Some Like It Hot. He returned to Texas later in life and died in 1973. He never softened the truth of who he was, he turned it into a performance. Number 6. Damu Dattatreya. Damu didn't yell, snap whips, or bark orders. He stood in the cage with tigers and lions and spoke to them like they were listening, and they listened. He started young, helping his uncle's circus in Pune, and somehow just gravitated toward the animals. Most people assumed he'd get hurt. Instead, he became one of the calmest, most respected animal trainers in the business. He performed across India, then moved on to Paris, then America, joining up with Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey. Audiences called him Prince Damu, but it wasn't about flash. It was the control, the silence, the confidence in every movement. During World War II, he gave lectures on animal behavior to U.S. troops and helped with morale. Later, illness forced him to walk away. He went home quietly and died in 1973. The circus moved on, but people in the industry never forgot how he worked. There was power in what he didn't do, and that's what set him apart. Number 5. Ivana Orloff. There's not much left in writing about Ivana Orloff, but the few who saw him still remembered. As a child, he was reportedly strong and healthy. Then something changed. No one could pinpoint the illness, but his skin lost color, and his body weakened. Some said you could hold up a newspaper to his chest and read through it. Others said light actually passed through him. He wasn't a magician or trickster. He stood in front of crowds without illusion. Just a man who looked like he didn't belong in his own body. He was given the name the Transparent and Ossified Man, and eventually ran his own show. He never added stunts or tried to provoke shock. He stood still under harsh lights and let people take in the reality of his condition. There was no pitch, no act, just presence. For many, that stillness stayed with them longer than any fire eater or acrobat ever could. Ivana didn't move the crowd. He haunted it. Number 4. Xiao Xiang. Well, Xiao didn't ask for attention. It just came with the territory. He kept growing through his teens and 20s until he hit over 8 feet. Gigantism had changed his entire body, but it didn't break his focus. He once dreamed of playing basketball, but a foot injury in 2001, left untreated for years, cut that short. A circus gave him work later that same year, and he found a place where size wasn't a flaw. It was an asset. But he didn't just stand there and look tall. He learned to play traditional Chinese instruments, practiced magic, and took control of his performance. His family was average-sized, and doctors warned him not to do heavy physical work, but he kept going carefully. He never chased records or asked to be labeled. Crowds came for his height, but they stayed because he knew how to perform. Xiao never turned into a sideshow, even if that's how it started. He stayed in charge of how people saw him. Number 3, Ferry Torres. Ferry wasn't looking to be anyone's idea of a star. He liked danger, animals, and being around the few people who didn't ask him to be anything else. He worked with crocodiles, snakes, scorpions, and macaws, sometimes at home, sometimes under the lights. His act wasn't clean or polished. He had scars to show where things went wrong, but that didn't stop him. He also found space in Amsterdam's LGBTQ community, especially the leather scene, where he felt fully seen. During COVID, he worked as a bouncer at Spiker Bar, still staying close to the life that made him feel like himself. In 2016, drugs were found in his reptile enclosure, and he was arrested, but he always said they weren't his. Then came cancer. He fought it until he couldn't anymore. Ferry died in 2023, and his animals were rehomed. He was messy, loyal, rough around the edges, but real. And in both the circus world and queer community, that meant everything. Number 2, the albino sword swallower. Now, this is my favorite. Sandra Reed could have let the world make assumptions about her albinism. Instead, she walked into the spotlight and took control of the narrative. She started in 1969 with the James E. Straits shows, not as a performer but as a speaker, explaining what albinism was and wasn't. That changed when circus veteran Whitney Sutton saw something more in her and introduced her to sword swallowing. Sandra trained with Ricky Ricciardi in Gibsonton, Florida, a place where many performers found refuge and family. It became a family affair. Her sister joined her on stage, her parents worked behind the curtain, and the act evolved. Sandra moved on to Ringling Bros, swallowed multiple blades at once, and even earned a Guinness World Record. She later married Harold Big Jim Spone, another well-known circus name. But her performance was never about shock. She wanted people to see her not for what was missing in pigment, but for what was present in courage. And that's what they remembered. Number 1, William Pagel. Before the spotlights, it was all fire, metal, and ships. Pagel worked steam boilers, bent steel, shoveled coal. He was built for tough jobs. But he wanted something wilder. With his wife Mary, he scraped together a circus and took it across southern Africa by wagon. It was messy, dangerous, and barely profitable. But people came. Pagel worked with lions and elephants, lifted weights in front of crowds, and turned raw strength into entertainment. Mary took on the big cats, even when people doubted her just for being British during wartime. Pagel got detained during World War I because of his German roots, but he pushed through it and eventually earned citizenship. Money stayed tight, but his name stuck. Rural towns remembered the drums, the animals, the dust, and him. He died in 1948, but his circus had already left its mark. It wasn't polished or rich. It was built on stubbornness, risk, and sweat. That's what kept it alive, and what people remembered. If you found this video interesting, be sure to like it, share it, and subscribe for more stories like this. Thanks for hanging with us, and we'll catch you soon.